Disrespect often arrives without warning. A cutting remark during a meeting, a joke made at your expense, a relative speaking to you as if your boundaries do not matter, a partner dismissing your feelings, a stranger trying to embarrass you in front of other people. For a moment, your body reacts before your mind has decided what to do. Your heartbeat changes, your face becomes warm, your muscles tighten. One part of you wants to attack, another part wants to disappear. And somewhere between those two impulses, you begin searching for the perfect response, the sentence that will restore your dignity and make the other person regret challenging you. But this is where most people make a costly mistake. They assume that power means reacting quickly. They believe they must answer every accusation, correct every insult, and prove themselves to every disrespectful person. So they raise their voice, they over-explain, they trade insult for insult, and without realizing it, they hand control of the situation to the very person who tried to disturb them. A disrespectful person usually expects one of three reactions. They expect you to become angry so they can call you unstable. They expect you to become defensive so they can make you seek their approval. Or they expect you to become silent out of fear so they can continue crossing the line. What they rarely expect is calm, deliberate self-respect, not passive silence, not weakness disguised as patience, not a clever performance designed to appear superior. Real composure, the ability to pause, understand what is happening, choose the right response, establish a boundary, and leave the other person alone with the consequences of their behavior. That is the Stoic advantage. The Stoics did not teach people to tolerate every form of mistreatment. They taught that your first responsibility is to govern your own judgment and conduct. You cannot always control what someone says, but you can decide whether their words will command your next action. You cannot prevent every insult, but you can refuse to become the kind of person the insult is trying to create. In this video, you will learn 7 responses to disrespect. These are not tricks for manipulating people. They are disciplines for protecting your clarity, dignity, and peace. You will learn when to remain silent, when to ask a question, when to establish a firm boundary, and when to walk away completely. And the final response is the one disrespectful people understand most clearly, not because it is loud, but because it carries a consequence. Let us begin with the moment in which your power is most often lost, the first few seconds. Point 1. Do not give them your first reaction. The first thing to do when someone disrespects you is deceptively simple. Do not give them your first reaction. Your first reaction is usually not wisdom. It is an alarm. Your body detects a threat to your status, identity, or sense of belonging, and it prepares you to fight, escape, or freeze. That physical response is normal, but normal does not mean it should be placed in charge. Imagine that a colleague interrupts your presentation and says, maybe someone who actually understands the project should explain this. Everyone becomes quiet. You feel the insult immediately. Your mind begins producing answers. At least I did the work. You never contribute anything. Who do you think you are? If you release the first sentence your anger creates, you may experience 2 seconds of satisfaction and 20 minutes of damage. The meeting stops being about their disrespect and becomes a conflict between two reactive people. They may even use your anger as evidence that you were the problem. Instead, create a gap. Take one slow breath. Relax your jaw. Lower your shoulders. Look at the person without rushing to fill the silence. You are not pausing because you have no answer. You are pausing because you refuse to let them select the version of you that will answer. This is one of the central disciplines of Stoicism. An external event occurs, but your interpretation and chosen response are not the same event. There is a space between what happens and what you decide it means. Training that space is how self-command is developed. A pause also changes the social dynamic. Disrespect often depends on speed. The aggressor wants to push you into a reaction before you can think. When you remain composed for 3 seconds, the insult no longer moves directly from their mouth into your behavior. It stops in front of you, exposed. Use this internal sentence. This is an impression, not an instruction. You may feel angry. That feeling is information. It tells you that a standard may have been violated. But anger is not automatically a command to attack. You can acknowledge it without obeying it. Then ask yourself 3 rapid questions. First, what exactly happened? Separate the words from your assumptions. Second, does this require a response right now? Third, what outcome do I want from my response? Perhaps the person made a careless remark rather than a deliberate attack. Perhaps they revealed information that needs to be corrected. Perhaps they crossed a clear boundary. Each situation calls for a different response, and you cannot see that difference while your ego is demanding immediate revenge. The person expected an emotional explosion. Give them observation instead. They expected you to lose control. Let your first act be the recovery of control. Do not rush. Breathe, observe, and decide. Your first feeling belongs to the moment. Your chosen response belongs to your character. Door 2. Make them explain what they meant after you pause. Do something something disrespectful people rarely expect. Ask them to explain themselves. Many insults survive because they move quickly. Someone hides contempt inside a joke, makes a vague accusation, or offers a backhanded compliment. If you react emotionally, they retreat behind phrases such as, "I was only joking," "You are too sensitive," or "That is not what I meant." Do not chase them through that confusion. Slow the conversation down. Ask calmly, "What do you mean by that?" Or, "Can you explain why you said that?" If the remark was disguised as humor, ask, "What part of that was supposed to be funny?" If they make a vague accusation, say, "Be specific. What exactly are you referring to?" These questions are powerful because they return responsibility to the speaker. You do not accept a hidden premise. You do not defend yourself against something that has not been clearly stated. You invite the person to place their intention in the open. Imagine a family gathering. Someone looks at you and says, "It must be nice not to have any real responsibilities." The usual response is defensive. You list your work, your obligations, and everything you have accomplished. But that places you in the position of applying for their approval. Instead, pause and ask, "What makes you say that?" Now they must choose. They can reveal their judgment, withdraw the remark, or admit that they were trying to provoke you. Whatever they choose, you gain information without surrendering your composure. This is not a trick to humiliate them. Your tone matters. If you ask the question with a smirk or hostile voice, you are simply fighting in a more sophisticated way. Ask with genuine steadiness. You are trying to understand whether the situation contains criticism worth considering, a misunderstanding worth correcting, or contempt that requires a boundary. Stoicism does not ask you to assume that every criticism is false. A secure person can examine feedback without collapsing. If the other person identifies something true, use it. Truth does not become harmful merely because it arrived through an unpleasant messenger. You can say, "The way you expressed that was disrespectful, but there may be something useful in the point. I will consider it." That response surprises people because it cannot be controlled by flattery or insult. You accept what is useful and reject what is degrading. But if the person refuses to explain, changes the subject, or says, "Everyone knows what I mean," do not rescue them. Let the silence remain. They introduce the remark. They are responsible for making it clear. Practice 4 questions. What do you mean? What specifically are you referring to? Why do you think that is appropriate? Would you say that if we were speaking privately? Each question moves you away from emotional defense and toward clear examination. The person expected you to argue with the insult. Instead, you ask them to account for it. When disrespect is forced to explain itself, it often becomes much smaller. 3. Describe the behavior without attacking the person. The third response is to name the behavior without attacking the person's identity. When people feel disrespected, they often answer one judgment with another. You are arrogant. You are toxic. You are a terrible person. These labels may feel justified, but they create an argument about character. The other person can deny the label, attack your character in return, or shift the conversation away from what actually happened. A stronger response is behavioral and specific. Say, "You interrupted me 3 times while I was answering." Or, "You made a joke about something I told you privately." Or, "You raised your voice and called me incompetent in front of the team." Facts are difficult to wrestle with. They reduce the space available for manipulation. Then describe the standard. "That is not an acceptable way to speak to me." Notice what this sentence does not contain. It does not contain a long explanation of your worth. It does not diagnose the other person. It does not beg them to understand your pain. It states what occurred and identifies the standard that was crossed. Imagine a manager criticizing your work during a meeting. Constructive criticism is part of work. Humiliation is not. If the manager says, "This analysis is incomplete because 2 data sources are missing," that may be uncomfortable but useful. If the manager says, "This is what happens when we give important work to someone at your level," the issue is no longer only the project. It is the manner of communication. You might answer, "I'm willing to discuss every problem in the analysis." The personal remark is unnecessary. Which 2 data sources need to be added? That answer performs 3 actions at once. You accept responsibility for the work. You reject the degrading behavior. And you return the conversation to the relevant issue. This is Stoic because it separates what matters from what does not. Your task may need improvement. Improve it. Their contempt does not need to be absorbed. Refuse it. You do not defend an illusion of perfection, and you do not permit accountability to become humiliation. The same principle works in relationships. Suppose your partner says, "You never care about anyone but yourself." Instead of replying, "You are the selfish one." Try, "You asked for my attention, and I continued looking at my phone. I understand why that hurt, but speaking in absolutes and attacking my character will not help us resolve it." Self-respect and accountability can exist together. Weak boundaries deny every fault because criticism feels threatening. Aggressive boundaries attack the other person to restore pride. Mature boundaries acknowledge what is true while protecting the standard of communication. Use this three-part formula. When you did or said this, it crossed this standard. We can continue if we speak in this way. For example, when you mocked my question in front of the group, it crossed the line from disagreement into disrespect. We can discuss the idea, but not through personal attacks. The person expected a counterattack. Give them precision. Possession is calm, difficult to distort, and easy for witnesses to understand. You are not trying to destroy the person. You are making the behavior visible and giving the conversation one opportunity to improve. Point 4. Set a boundary that requires no propensions. The fourth response is the one many people avoid. Establish a boundary without asking the other person to approve it. A request tells someone what you would like. A boundary tells them what you will do if a behavior continues. Please stop speaking to me like that is a request. If the personal insults continue, I will end this conversation is a boundary. The difference is control. You cannot guarantee that another person will become respectful. You can decide whether you will remain available for repeated disrespect. This is where the Stoic distinction between what is and is not under your control becomes practical. Their attitude is not yours to command. Your participation is. A clear boundary has three qualities. First, it is specific. Avoid broad declarations such as, you need to respect me. Different people define respect differently. Name the behavior. Shouting, insults, mockery, unwanted comments, invasion of privacy, or repeated interruption. Second, it is proportionate. A minor careless remark may require a correction, not the end of a relationship. Repeated humiliation may require distance or formal action. The consequence should fit the pattern. Third, it is enforceable. Do not threaten something you cannot or will not do. A boundary loses meaning when it is announced repeatedly but never followed. Suppose someone begins shouting during an argument. You can say, I want to discuss this, but I will not continue while we are shouting. If it continues, I am going to leave and we can try again later. If they continue, leave. Do not deliver another 10-minute speech. Do not argue about whether you are allowed to leave. The enforcement of the boundary is the explanation. At work, the language may be more formal. I'm available to discuss the project, but personal insults are not appropriate. If they continue, I will end the meeting and document the issue through the proper channel. Online, the boundary may be even simpler. Delete, block, restrict, or disengage. Access to your attention is not a constitutional right. Some people will accuse you of being dramatic when your boundary removes a benefit they previously enjoyed. They were comfortable when your discomfort had no consequence. Your change may feel like hostility to someone who benefited from your lack of limits. Do not argue endlessly about whether your boundary is reasonable. Listen to legitimate feedback, but remember that a boundary is not a vote. It is a decision about your behavior and availability. However, boundaries should not become tools of control. Do what I want or I will punish you is not healthy self-protection. A legitimate boundary protects your time, safety, dignity, or responsibilities. It does not force another person to surrender their autonomy. Try these sentences. I will continue when we can speak respectfully. If you make another comment about my body, I will leave. I do not discuss private matters in front of other people. If the insults continue, I will communicate only in writing. The disrespectful person expected you either to tolerate everything or to explode. A boundary is neither. It is calm information followed by consistent action. And consistency is what gives a boundary its PowerPoint 5. Do not turn your dignity into a performance. The fifth response is internal but essential. Stop trying to win the audience. Public disrespect feels especially painful because it appears to threaten your social position. You imagine that everyone is judging you. You think you must produce the perfect comeback or people will assume the insult was true. This pressure makes you perform. You become louder than necessary. You search for a sentence that will make the room laugh. You try to humiliate the other person more effectively than they humiliated you. Even if you win the exchange, you may lose the character you intended to protect. Ask yourself, if no one else were watching, what would the wise response be? That question removes the theater. Suppose someone mocks your mistake during a group discussion. There may be 10 people in the room, but your responsibility does not change. Correct the mistake if it is real. Address the disrespect if necessary. Then return to the purpose of the conversation. You might say, the figure I gave was incorrect. The correct number is 42. The mockery does not improve the discussion. So let's continue with the facts. You neither hide the error nor surrender your dignity. People often respect composure more than clever retaliation. But even that cannot be your primary motive, because then your calm becomes another performance for approval. The deeper goal is to leave the situation without being ashamed of your own conduct. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself to focus on the qualities required by the present moment: honesty, justice, self-control, and clear judgment. He was not preparing to win every observer. He was trying to act according to character. better. That gives you a better for success. Successes is not making the other person apologize immediately. Successes is not having the final word. Success is not convincing every witness that you were right. Successes is responding in a way you can defend when the emotion is gone. Sometimes that means speaking firmly. Sometimes it means correcting a false statement. Sometimes it means saying nothing because the remark does not deserve elevation. And sometimes it means asking for support because the situation involves harassment, discrimination, threats, or abuse. Stoicism is not a command to suffer dangerous behavior alone. If you face repeated workplace harassment, document dates, exact words, witnesses, and relevant messages. Use formal reporting processes. If you face threats or violence, prioritize safety and contact appropriate support or authorities. Courage includes taking intelligent protective action. Do not confuse endurance with virtue. Remaining in unnecessary harm merely to appear strong is still a performance. The person who disrespects you may be seeking a stage. Refuse to become their co-star. Address what matters, protect what matters, and let the audience think whatever it chooses. Your dignity is not created by their applause, and it is not destroyed by their misunderstanding. 6. Let patterns, not promises, guide your decision. The sixth response is to stop judging the person only by what they say after the incident. Judge the pattern. Many disrespectful interactions are followed by persuasive language. I didn't mean it. You know how I am. I was stressed. You made me angry. I promise it will never happen again. An explanation may be sincere. Everyone occasionally speaks carelessly. Stoicism encourages fairness, not suspicion. But fairness includes observing reality accurately. An apology is meaningful when it contains recognition, responsibility, repair, and changed behavior. Without change, an apology can become a reset button that allows the same pattern to continue. Ask 4 questions. Did they clearly acknowledge what they did? Did they take responsibility without blaming your reaction? Did they attempt to repair the harm? Did their behavior change over time? This prevents you from being controlled by a beautiful speech after every ugly action. Imagine a friend who repeatedly mocks private details in front of others. Each time, they apologize and say they were only trying to be funny. You explain the boundary clearly. They agree. Then, at the next gathering, they do it again. The issue is no longer whether they understand. The pattern is the answer. You do not need to launch a dramatic final confrontation. You can reduce access, share less personal information, spend less time in environments where the behavior occurs, decline invitations. If the relationship requires a direct conclusion, speak plainly. We have discussed this several times, and the behavior continues. I am stepping back from the relationship. That sentence does not beg. It does not prosecute every detail. It recognizes the evidence and acts. Stoic judgment requires seeing what is actually present rather than what you desperately hope will be present. If you keep replacing evidence with potential, you may remain attached to an imaginary version of the person while the real version repeatedly harms you. At the same time, do not define someone forever by one bad moment. You also have spoken poorly, misunderstood situations, and failed your own standards. Look for the difference between an incident and a pattern. An incident is followed by accountability and effort. A pattern is followed by excuses, blame, temporary charm, and repetition. Keep a brief written record when the stakes are high, especially in professional environments. Memory becomes uncertain under stress. Documentation allows you to distinguish a genuine pattern from a powerful emotional impression. The disrespectful person expects their next promise to erase their previous behavior. Let consistent evidence, not hope, guilt, or pressure, guide your decision. You do not have to hate someone to recognize that they should have less access to your life. You do not have to prove that they are evil. You only need enough clarity to decide what level of contact is wise. Point 7. Remove the reward. Your access, attention, and participation. The seventh response is often the most unexpected. Remove the reward. Disrespect frequently continues because it produces something valuable for the person doing it. It gives them attention. It creates drama. It helps them dominate a conversation. It makes an audience laugh. It pulls you into endless explanations. Or it proves that they can still control your emotional state. If you keep supplying the reward, your words may change nothing. Removing the reward does not mean pretending not to care while secretly obsessing. It means making a deliberate decision about where your attention, action, access, and participation will go. If someone sends provocative messages, you do not have to answer each one. If a conversation becomes abusive, you can end it. If a person repeatedly weaponizes private information, you stop giving them private information. If an online stranger is committed to misunderstanding you, you let them misunderstand you without donating the rest of your evening. This is not the silent treatment. The silent treatment is used to punish or control someone by withholding communication. Strategic disengagement is used to end an unproductive or harmful interaction. The intention and context are different. When possible, communicate the decision clearly. This conversation is no longer productive. I am ending it now. Then end it. Do not send 6 more paragraphs after announcing your departure. Do not monitor whether they are upset. Do not return 5 minutes later because you thought of a better sentence. Your departure becomes credible only when you actually depart. In some situations, complete disengagement is impossible. You may share a workplace, family responsibility, or parenting obligation. In that case, reduce the interaction to what is necessary. Use brief, factual language. Prefer written communication when appropriate. Avoid emotional side arguments. Keep the subject narrow. For example, I will respond only to messages related to the project deadline, or we can discuss the children's schedule. I will not engage with personal insults. This is disciplined attention. Epictetus built his philosophy around the recognition that some things belong to our agency and others do not. Another person's approval, regret, or transformation is not fully yours. Your attention and conduct are much closer to your responsibility. So, stop building your peace around the day they finally understand what they did. They may never understand. They may create a story in which you are the villain. They may call your boundary arrogance because they preferred your availability without conditions. Let them have their story. You have your decision. The final answer to repeated disrespect is not always a sentence. Sometimes it is reduced access. Sometimes it is a closed door. Sometimes it is a formal report. Sometimes it is the calm consistency of a life that no longer revolves around the offender. That is what they do not expect. They expect rage because rage keeps you connected. They expect explanations because explanations keep them important. They expect threats without action because that allows the pattern to continue. What they do not expect is for you to see the behavior clearly, state the standard once, apply the consequence, and move forward without asking them to validate your choice. Your peace is not a prize they must agree to return. It is a responsibility you must stop abandoning. Conclusions. The 7-step Stoic responds the next time someone disrespects you. Remember these 7 responses. First, do not give them your first reaction. Pause long enough to choose the person who will answer. Second, ask them to explain what they meant. Make vague disrespect become specific. Third, describe the behavior without attacking their identity. Precision is stronger than a counter-insult. Fourth, establish a boundary that requires no permission. State what you will do and follow through. Fifth, do not turn your dignity into a performance. Choose the response you can respect after the audience is gone. Sixth, let patterns, not promises, guide your decisions. Change behavior is more meaningful than repeated apologies. And seventh, remove the reward. Withdraw unnecessary attention, access, and participation from repeated disrespect. None of this requires you to become emotionless. You may still feel hurt. You may replay the moment later. You may think of the perfect response after the conversation has ended. That does not mean you failed. Stoic strength is not the absence of emotion. It is the refusal to let a temporary emotion become a permanent commander. Tonight, take a page and divide it into 2 columns. On the left, write what they control. On the right, write what I control. Under their column, write their words, their opinion, their apology, and whether they change. Under your column, write your pause, your standards, your boundary, your attention, and your next action. Then place your energy only where it can become character. You cannot stop every person from testing your dignity, but you can stop treating every test as an order to abandon it. The goal is not to win a battle of egos. The goal is to remain just, clear, and self-controlled while protecting what should not be surrendered. If this message reached you at the right time, write this in the comments. My response is my choice. And if you want more practical Stoic lessons for discipline, emotional control, and inner peace, subscribe and join us for the next video. Until then, remain calm, but never careless with your boundaries.